it's a whole lot more than that. You have to be a part player in society. You have to be able to contextualize what you're learning. And so the best scholars, the most relatable scholars, are actually those that can understand the context in which we live and be able to relate to that.
But also it's very important that the scholars recognise what the purpose of any law or any decision is, because and what's the spirit of something that needs to be done. And going back to the original question, Nikki, is fundamentalism a danger to faith? I think it's a serious danger, and there's something we haven't talked about, and that's terrorism and extremism. You know, fundamentalism, the creation of them and us, the way that some extremists regard the other as somebody that is a viable target for terrorist activities, whoever they are, and that can be within the same faith or outside.
So there's a sort of supremacism about it.
Oh, absolutely. There's a concept in Islam that sort of raised its ugly head a couple of hundred years ago, maybe actually a bit before that as well, and that's the concept of takfir. And that's the concept of saying that anybody who does not agree with the way that I interpret, and that's the key word, interpret the Quran and the Hadith, is not a Muslim, or is not somebody that I actually should treat in the same manner as I can treat as a Muslim, and he or she is a target.
We hear this quite a lot, Khalid. He is not a proper Muslim. You are not a proper Muslim. She is. We had a little hint of that earlier on, maybe, didn't we, as well?
We did, yeah. And you know, for me, it's a disgrace, quite honestly. You know, we are ourselves, and we stand before God ourselves. And you know, it's not for me to judge somebody else. You know, and I think that's really...
There's a great hadith I just want to mention that it's...
Hold fire.
There's a great hadith that always inspires me, and the hadith is the same of the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, and that is that there are as many parts to God as there are breaths of man. And that's certainly something that I buy into and try and live my life to.
You would say there's only one path to God, of course, wouldn't you, Abdullah Hassan? Yeah. And I know that you think that it's mandatory for women to wear a head covering, for example. A hijab,
yes.
Yeah. What, if they don't?
Can I just add
in a minute,
comments?
In a minute, but if they don't wear the hijab...
Well, let me tackle the other actual question.
I'll answer the question first, then you can... Let's do it my way.
Yeah? We have to go,
my way is the only way. That's what we've been talking about. There you go. Yeah. Is it mandatory for women to wear the...
From an Islamic perspective,
yeah,
from a Quranic perspective, and this is the mainstream view, the majority of the view amongst the scholars, across the board, is that the Muslim women, they have to cover their head, they have to wear the hijab.
Or?
They will be accountable to God. But I'm not in a position to look down upon them or rebuke them or censor them. I encourage them to wear the hijab. I encourage them to...
God will judge them.
This is a personal issue between them and God. I'm not in a position to coerce them or compel them to wear the hijab. I would like them to observe the hijab, because this is what Islam says. But if they do not wish to, it's a matter of choice.
I take the women. With the phrase, I would like them to wear hijab. It's actually got nothing to do with you or I as to what a Muslim woman wears on her head or not. That's her decision.
That's why I wanted to come back to... I agree much of what Khalid said regarding, we have to also understand in Islam and any other faith, there are certain principles that do not change. In Islam, we have the 5 pillars of Islam, that we have to believe in God, pray, and so on and so forth. There are certain principles will never change. There are other issues which are between them, they will change according to time and place and context. But certain things in Islam will not change. The hijab, the issue of hijab, women need to cover, this will not change. And this is just because I follow the view does not make me a fundamentalist. We have to also go back. What does that mean? Yes, some people will say, because I pray 5 times a day, I'm an extremist or fundamentalist. But I don't agree with that. Right, so we have to
you find on music as well, don't you? I know that personally, I know this. Scholars are divided on this, as you say, but you think that music.
So can I just finish that point? Yeah.
I thought you had. Sorry.
No, I haven't. About the certain immutable principle in Islam which do not change.
Yeah,
I'm sure with any other civilization or community, but certain things, and most of the things do change. the issue about hijab will not change.
Will not change.
Will not change.
Sorry, can I are all parts of it? Are all schools of Islam saying that women should wear hijab? Are all responses?
Let's get Khaled. Wait, Khaled, come back.
See, I think I understand what you're saying, okay, but you've gone from the 5 pillars of Islam, okay, to hijab, okay, and that's the jump that I struggle with. I understand that the majority of scholars consider hijab to be compulsory, okay, I understand that. There are people who would discuss that, okay, and that discussion should be allowable, and it may be that in time, people, because the verse that you've taken about hijab, it's interpreted, okay? It is interpreted.
It's not
and
just the
some
verse.
yeah, of course it's not.
Answer the question.
Speak for a moment.
But let me just can I just finish? So all I'm saying is that from jumping from those 5 pillars, where I agree with you totally, to hijab or to something else, okay? It's not quite in the same bracket, is it? You know, and I think there is discussion among scholars about hijab.
Yeah. But I just gave an example of the 5 pillars. I could have mentioned about stealing, about lying. That principle will not change.
Sure.
So I could have mentioned other things, but we don't have time, obviously. But I think women can answer that question regarding hijab.
Yeah, I mean, Yvonne, welcome. Yvonne Ridley, who's been on an incredible journey. Give Yvonne a round of applause. She's here today. One thing with you that I've noticed, because we worked together years ago on Carlton Television, before you went to Afghanistan, and then, of course, you reverted, as you would say, converted to Islam. You don't shake a man's hand anymore. Why's that?
No, I mean, that was something that I looked into. At first I did, but some men are handshakers, others aren't. And so I would extend my hand and they would go like that. Then I wouldn't, and they would go like that. And in the end, I just decided the easiest thing to do is not to shake anybody's hand and go for the least line of resistance.
Is that in the Quran or the Hadith?
And
any of that?
There are Hadith about it, but I'm not a scholar. I am learning about Islam, but one thing that the Islam has a rotten public perception. The outside, people looking outside, look and see oppressed, subjugated, silent women when they see a woman with a hijab. And the problem is Islam has been hijacked by male-dominated cultures. And we see it right across Britain. You look at the breakdown of mosque committees, they're nearly all men. You look at all the... well, I was listening to you and I really had sympathy there. You look at all the Muslim male, well, they are male organisations speaking for women. I did look into the hijab. It was more than a year before I put on a hijab. It is simple. There's one rule for women, and that is to dress modestly and cover your head.
But you used to dress modestly when I knew you before.
Yeah, well, my little black dress is now a big black dress. You know, that's the main difference. But the rules and regulations governing what men should wear there's a great big long list, and yet everybody will focus on the hijab. And it's so wrong to just focus on this one piece.
Really and Cry, do you want to come in here?
Well, yes, it's really interesting what Yvonne is saying, and it's similar concerns to what I've had over the years. 13 years as Member of Parliament for Keighley, where it's 20, probably more than 20% now, Muslim, mainly Pakistani, some Bangladeshis. And I had great concern, and have great concern, the way that men and their views of women monopolise the thinking, both inside and outside of the mosque.
But it's not
in their community.
It is totally cultural, and it's in your area, and in Jack Straw's area, that I cannot go and walk into a mosque and pray. And it is absolutely outrageous. They'll open the doors to Condoleezza Rice. She was welcome. But as a Muslim woman, I couldn't go in and pray.
Laura.
This is outrageous.
Laura.
One of the great similarities between Islam and Judaism is the way that we work with law. And one of the struggles for us as Jews and for Jewish women and progressive Jews is being able to be decision makers as women. So I just want to ask, you talk about authority and scholars. What is the gender of people who make decisions? I don't know. I'd love to know.
Can I just make a point before I answer that question?
No, I'd like to answer the question.
Well, I mean, I agree with much of what Yvonne Ridley said and the lady over there said regarding about men dominating. And I mean, before I was appointed as an imam, people thought, you know, you're too young to be an imam. So, you know, people also say, you know, why are you an imam? So it's not only for women, but to answer that question,
you won't always be young, but you'll always be a man.
yes,
that's the thing.
But it's true. I agree with that. Many Muslim societies, men dominate. Men speak for women. Men say what they should wear, what they should not wear, what they should eat, how they should move about, and so on and so forth. We have many female scholars in the past. We had many female scholars, and they've written books and they taught men. So in Islamic history, we had even the wife of the Prophet Muhammad, the other companions, female companions. They were leaders. The first Muslim to embrace Islam was a woman. The first martyr who fought in the battlefield was a woman.
Let's get back to that whole closing down of the debate. I think it's important because I know what you believe. And you believe, for example, if somebody accepts the science of, for example, evolution, which is what I think it's not something like 99.8% of scientists in the world accept, broadly speaking, you say they're not a proper Muslim. And this is a kind of problem, isn't it?
Hang on, I didn't say that.
Oh, I thought you did.
Well, let me clarify.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, let me clarify. Evolution issue in Islam is, according to the mainstream view, is quite simple. We don't believe in that Adam, peace be upon him, came from monkeys or anything like that. We believe that God created Adam, peace be upon him. Now, how we done that and so on and so forth, that's going to details. We don't have time, nor we don't really know the reality. But if a person believes in that, then this person is going against a principle in Islam. Now, God will judge him according to that.
So, but this is the point, isn't it? If you don't believe a certain thing, if you agree with, for example, something that is embraced by the vast majority of modern science, you're not a proper Muslim. This is it, Laura, isn't it?
Well, I wanted to hear what Linda had to say. Actually, hand over to you. My point. Sorry.
My worry is that these views, even though minority views, have now so influenced mainstream religion that an awful lot of people think that religion is just about being anti-this, anti-women, anti-sexuality, anti-all the rest of it. And so people find it really surprising when I tell my students, who really campaigned for the liberalisation of abortion, of divorce and of homosexuality in this country in the 60s and late 50s? Who was campaigning? The Church of England. The Church of England was at the forefront of pushing forward sexual liberalisation. People have now completely forgotten that because the churches themselves have so gone back on it. There's been a complete turnaround in the Catholic Church and the Anglican Church since the 60s, with the Catholic Church condemning contraception in 1968, which surprised all sorts of Catholics. That I think that these churches haven't been able to resist the voices of people saying this is the only one true way. So fundamentalism, you said, what's the danger? It's had this huge impact and put off huge swathes of people against religion because that religion has gone out of kilter with our lives.
In a second you can, please, because I know this is what you think as well, isn't it? That it's all about the perception of your religion from other people.
So
it's damaged by a lot of this.
Richard Dawkins in a way.
I mean, you know, you pick up any newspaper or in the media, the stories we hear about Islam are poor. They're fundamentalism, extremism, all those kind of words are bandied about, terrorism. And unfortunately, the mass population, most of us here in Britain, get a lot of the information about faith and about Islam from the media. And this is a real issue. And you know, when fundamentalism causes that sort of reaction and limits, for example, women from entering mosques and from taking part in discussion,
debate about things,
you know, that's where we have issues, because that is stimming, it's blocking a faith from exploring, from being the best that it can be.
And I think also fundamentalism breeds intolerance, and once intolerance is breeded, it breeds intolerance again, and it's a vicious circle that keeps going round and round.
I think fundamentalism, women not being allowed in mosques, it's cultural. And that is one of the most damaging issues in Islam.
Anquire, how does this, wait a minute, Anquire, in a second, Leslie, how does this manifest itself in what you've seen?
Well, what I want to ask our various Muslim friends here is what views do they take about the fact that in the vast majority of mosques in both Bradford and just let me finish, and Keighley, the imams are pretty well uneducated. They've been brought in from Mirpur, where there's very little education in any case, and they're brought in I think because they do what they're told. I'm not sure, I may be wrong, and certainly that this sort of imam does lead to the sort of situation that we're hearing of, where, I mean, the main mosque in Keighley, they have a women's prayer room, but to my knowledge, it's never been used. So they're sort of trying to break out of this sort of way of this backward view of women, but they don't seem to be doing it very well. And I'm just wondering if we were able to get better educated imams who have been educated in this country and know the ways of this country.
Did anyone, the ways of this country, whatever they have, did any of them support you in your campaign against so-called forced marriages?
Not openly.
Again, that's
Can
cultural.
I just,
It has
It's a
nothing
cultural,
to do
yeah,
with Islam.
I would never...
This is cultural, this is not in the Quran, not in the biography of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It's cultural. And I totally 110% agree with you regarding imams who are brought from Pakistan, Bangladesh, and God knows where else. They can't speak English, they don't know the society they live in, right? It's because, and they are told what to say, what not to say. And we need to change that, of course. But how do we change it?
It is changing.
It is changing.
It is changing. There are areas, you know, where we have mosques with very intelligent, very educated imams who give the Friday sermons, for example, in English, so that the people can understand. The kids are trying to understand, you know, faith with people that understand the context in which they live.
The whole idea, is it just cultural? The whole idea of you know, forced marriages?
I don't believe it is culture, because I believe culture is the surface of something. It is some practices that you learn, and it's huge power behind that. I believe that Islam has got its own culture and the other as well. In Islam, what can justify a forced marriage is that give permission to the parents to choose for their children because it's the best way for them. And it's not about translation, okay? I don't believe that is translation. I disagree with Khalid, and I very much agree with you that whatever is in Quran, it's it is in that. And actually, the role of women is not equal citizen in Islam and in other religion as well, not only Islam, in Jewish and in Christian.
So women is substituted a parent can force their sons or daughters to marry a person that they don't choose to.
Then my question is that why it's happened mostly in Muslim community.
When women came to him and she said, my parents are requesting me to marry someone which I don't want, he said, don't marry him.
Why can't Anne get the mosques, the imams to condemn it openly?
Because, as she said correctly, most of the imams, 99% of our imams, now it's changing, thank God, are imams who are backward, who don't speak the English language, who don't even understand what Islam is. No, it's true. I am an imam. I know. I work with certain people. I am in the community, in the grassroots.
There are 5,000 to 8,000 cases of this in England every year.
It's a lot.
Forced marriage is completely prohibited in Islam. It's not. Islam doesn't endorse it in any way.
There are some people. I agree with you, Abdullah, that there is nothing in Islam that actually subjugates women in the way that you've mentioned, and yet people still, in my view, incorrectly, theologically justify the fact that there's no such thing as rape in a marriage, theologically justify that women shouldn't come and pray in the mosque. There are people who theologically justify that women shouldn't be in the same room.
With any text, any constitution, people will use it, misuse it.
But I'm saying education is very important. But there are people that do.
All right, wait a minute. All at once. It's Anne Cryer. I mean, the battle goes on, but it's a very complex issue. And the key to it is education. The key to it, I guess, is modernity in a sense.
Yes, it is. I mean, let's not forget, you know, that the Lord Mayor of Bradford at the moment is a woman. You know, nobody talks about it, but she is. And she's leading the way in her own way. But I think we have to get back to the mosques. And yes, I mean, it would have been wonderful if just one or two imams had said in the 13 years when I was prattling on about forced marriages, if they'd just come out and said, we agree with what Ankara is saying, to force sons and daughters to marry is un-Islamic, it's wrong. I just wish they'd said it once.
Nikki, I've been saying this for
I know you've been saying it, but it's a matter of
domestic violence awareness organisation called Noor in Islam.
Maybe you're too young and you're not revered and venerated like the older guys are. Maybe people
I have some followers.
Listen, Leslie Pilkington, you mentioned the issue earlier on, Linda, of homosexuality, which is a big challenge for all churches, all denominations, all credos right now, isn't it? And Leslie Pilkington, of course, you've been in the news recently, Leslie, evangelical Christian. You believe the Bible. You believe every word of the Bible.
Yes.
And you were in the news because you were giving counselling to try and, well, how would you describe it? Cure?
No.
No, how would you describe it?
The young man came to me because he said he was depressed and unhappy with being homosexual. Now, I know this is a very controversial area, lots of people won't agree with me, and that's fine. I respect all the different points of view here. But the fact of the matter is, as a fundamental Christian, as a Bible-believing